Hey everybody, Walter Crosby from Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Today's episode is with my buddy Zack Bower. Zack is one of the sales reps for Membrain. He's the guy I work with to talk to companies about Membrain and all the value that it provides. I don't do this a lot. I don't have a lot of conversations with salespeople, and I'm thinking that this might be something I need to do because we talk about how a salesperson who's performing their idea of, continuous improvement and what that means to them. And you'll hear from Zack in his own words, how he looks at that. We talk a little bit about cigars, of course, but we also get into a new product that's being launched through Membrain. We'll touch on that and why it's important and how it's going to be helpful to everybody. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. So Zack, welcome to Sales and Cigars. I appreciate you taking some time out of your prospecting day to come chat with us.
Walter, I appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to chatting with you a bit. Been a long time listener of the show, first time guest, so it's pretty exciting.
It's like that old sports talk radio, long time listener, first time caller.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Although I haven't listened to sports radio in like a decade. Do they still do that?
I don't know. I've always been a talk radio guy myself, but that's a common thing there, right? Hey, yeah. How you doing? No, just get to the question. All right, let's keep things moving.
Yeah, because everybody knows you like the guy. Otherwise, you wouldn't be calling.
Exactly.
And if you don't like the guy, that'll become apparent very quickly.
Yeah.
Because when they start calling you names. So we'll get into our relationship because we've known each other for a while at different points in your career, and you're with Membrain, and Membrain's one of our partners. But let's talk a little bit about, let's start with the book. I always think that gives the audience a peek into your brain. Is there a book that you read a lot or you recommend to others?
Yeah, I've had a number of books, over the years that have had an impact on me from a business and sales perspective. But I think the one that I always find myself going back to and definitely recommending to people is Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount. And the reason for that is after reading that book, I saw an immediate shift in my mindset when it comes to outbound and really doing the things at the top of the funnel that drive the opportunities later on. So definitely the one that I recommend.
So it was a mindset shift about the being consistent, because consistency is one of the things he talks about in that book. But he spends a lot of time helping people realize that it's okay to be prospecting. We should be prospecting. We must be prospecting. And if you don't do anything else consistently, that will help you be a better salesperson than even just being consistent with that's always going to keep things top of the funnel full.
Absolutely. I mean, prospecting is the lifeblood of sales at the end of the day, right? Because you've always got to have something to backfill. Every time you win a deal, you've got to find that next bit of business, right, to keep the engine running. But I think one of the key reasons it was impactful for me personally was that was right before I moved into doing, the fractional SDR work that I did for a couple of years. And so, again, just that the mindset, like you said, is really the key. And it's not necessarily from a tactical perspective. Like there's definitely things that Jeb talks about in that book that don't really resonate with my personal approach and my style. But the resounding message there is the consistency in doing the things that aren't necessarily the most fun, figuring out what works for you and just doing that at scale again and again and again till you just, you make it a habit. And that's the key to being successful there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think and going back, and that's one of those books that you can, if you tag the book or you put a sticky note in there, or Audible, you bookmark it, or you just go back to that section to get your juice back up, or to remind you of the thing that you resonated with you the first time. That's awesome. And that's he sold a lot of copies of it, but the thing is that most people that buy a book don't read a book. They don't. Fewer finish it, even fewer apply it, and just a tiny percentage of people actually go back and really use it as a guide to improve their performance. So I want to talk about the new thing coming out with Membrain, but let's give people a little background. I mean, you've been in sales for a while. You've always been, the guy that will pound the phone. But like, how did it start? Like, you trip over something and end up a salesperson, stood in the wrong line. How did it work?
Yeah, sort of. So I guess growing up, I never envisioned myself to become a salesperson, right? That was never even on the radar. But years ago, I had aspirations to go work for Harley Davidson at the corporate level. And so to open the door to that potential, I took a job washing motorcycles at a dealership. And long story short, that transitioned into me becoming a sales rep on the floor at the dealership. Ended up doing really well there, and then made a transition into the B2B space in another area of power sports, and did that for a few years as well. And it was just kind of it was a natural progression for me to go from, selling B2C in the power sports space to B2B in the power sports space. And that's kind of, transitioned into a number of different things over the last few years. But that's really where I got my start was selling Harleys.
Do you have a passion for motorcycles back then?
I did. Yeah. And I think it's still there. It's just not, at the forefront because life changes. Right. But it's still something I enjoy.
Yeah. Marriage, children have a tendency to refocus our energies. With most of us. So there's a concept that you may have heard of it. It's not mine. It's Timothy Gladwell's formula, and I always think about this when I'm working with salespeople and coaching. But it's this idea that performance equals someone's potential minus interference, and I look at it as I see potential especially with salespeople. I see things that they don't see, especially ones that have been in a space for a while, who, are doing well, but they don't have that continuous improvement mindset. So that's part of their interference, or they don't have confidence, or whatever their particular situation is. Is that something because you've got professionals working with you over the years, and coaches and things that you read books. I think you have that continuous improvement mindset. So I'm curious as to a guy that's a contributor that's out there on the regular, like, what is for you, or what have you noticed that could be the interference to stopping you from being, you reach your potential?
Yeah, such a powerful question. So I think about, myself in my early 20s when I was just getting started as a salesperson versus where I'm at now. And it's like the motivation for me has shifted, 180 degrees really, because early on it was very much, got to be the best, very ego driven. Like I probably wasn't honestly the most customer centric, like in my thought process and that sort of thing. And as I've gotten older, the thing that keeps me, I guess, like striving for the right mindset and like in that idea of continuous improvement is really understanding that, one, I'm not the best. Two, like there's always something to learn no matter the situation. And it's really, to me, about kind of uncovering those blind spots, and that happens, naturally, like reviewing a call that I was on and picking up like, things or areas that I could have done better or asked a question better, or it comes out in conversations like you and I have, offline, where we're just talking about the dynamics of a sales conversation. And I'm not sure if that is really the answer that you're looking for to the question, but I think that's kind of where I'm living right now, is like, how can I like hone the spear a little bit more, right? And just fine tune things. I don't know. I'm not gonna lie,
I
like I
think,
battle.
yeah, we all have things that we want to get better at. Not, well, I take that back. Not everybody does. And there are some people that are just happy doing what they're doing, and they don't want to go into the uncomfortable space of growth. And I think that if we go through that, that 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 time period it takes to grow and be uncomfortable with what we're trying, being uncomfortable with, wow, this is really new and I'm not good at it, but if I keep doing it, I'll get better, right? So we get in our own way as salespeople, I think, on a regular basis. But the difference is, if you have a mindset of, I want to get better, I need to get better, right? I must get better, then you will look for those opportunities, whether you're debriefing yourself after a call, or if you're debriefing it with a manager or a coach or anybody else, right? You're you have that desire, and there's a lot of salespeople who don't want to enter that uncomfortable zone, and they just stay where they are, and if you're not growing, you're not you're dying in a certain sense. You're not challenging yourself, and you lose that potential, and you stop believing it. So I think you answered the question. You used a couple of words that I hear a lot from folks who are trying to get better. The blind spot, and when like you mentioned, being reflection, have like a reflective time about listening to what you said or thinking about what you said. I can't tell you how many times I left a meeting back when we used to get in a car and go to a meeting and then get out of the meeting and go to your car and sit in the parking lot and think, shit, I didn't go deep enough around the budget. I didn't go deep enough around why this guy was going to make a change. And those are the moments where it sucks sometimes, and sometimes you can't fix it, but it's okay if you learn from it. And I think that's part of what I'm hearing from you. Have you ever been on a team, not the team you're on now, but ever been on a team where there's salespeople who just kind of mediocre? I'm going to do the basics. I'm going to get by. I'm going to get close to my number. That'll be good enough. And is that, you ever experience that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm sure there's times where I've fallen into that mindset too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think back on times like that, and how much potential did I leave on the table, right? Because I guess that's the other thing too. Like now, I'm not really concerned about what like other people are doing. I'm trying to figure out how, I can make the most impact and like do the next right thing, right? But yeah, I mean I think that's also a morale thing too, right? If you've got a team of people that are okay just being stagnant and not growing, like that's not an area where I want to be anyway. Because
But how do you think that affects, like, if you're a performer and you're trying to be a performer, right? how does that mediocrity land with the folks that are trying to get better? What does it do to morale? What does it do to your motivation?
I think it really depends on the personality, right? The mix of personalities on a team. For somebody who's inherently a top performer, I think in a lot of cases they're going to do what they need to do anyway, regardless of what somebody in the middle of the pack or the bottom of the field is doing. But I think the biggest risk it poses is for that kind of average, right? Because it lowers your average if you have more people that are not performing well. And I think that's broadly where you have the biggest pitfall with mediocrity, is when you've got a lot of people that are just mutually lowering the bar. You got a couple outliers, maybe leading the pack, but I don't know. That's what I see as the biggest risk there.
Yeah, I see that happening in cases, and if you're a performer, you're always going to strive. Mm-hmm. But there'll be those days when you need something to keep you going, right? Because we all have those days. And when you look around, it's like, they're tolerating that crap. So, maybe if I just take the afternoon and don't spend my, hour prospecting, it's not going to be the end of the world. Mm-hmm. When to me, that's the danger, right? Because we're constantly fighting ourselves, and we need to create that discipline as salespeople to consistently prospect, as Jeb would say. So I see it as like those performers are always going to try to be better, but it becomes an annoyance. It becomes an effect on the team's numbers. When mm-hmm. you look at the team, especially if there's multiple teams in an organization and you're kind of competing for, even if there's no money involved, you're competing for the status and the ego and, maybe the trip to the beach or whatever, right? Or the mm-hmm. silly little trophy you get. But I think it's something that leaders need to be conscious of, and rooting the people out or putting them in a different seat mm-hmm. where they're better prepared.
Yeah. I think it's worth noting too, like the way the landscape has changed a bit over the last 3 or 4 years with more remote workers. I think that's even more important, because you feed off of a lot of the energy, whether it's present or perceived. And I can definitely, fall into that too. Like feeding off the energy is a big thing, and using that is kind of an external motivator, I guess, to keep pushing the needle and moving forward.
That's a really, really strong point, Zach, because you just brought back a memory where I was at a company, and I was battling to be the top salesperson, right? There was 2 of us it was going to be one of us, right? And the person who got second was going to be the first loser. And that's just how we looked at it, right? And I know that's not popular these days, but that's how we looked at it. And it was a rivalry, but at the same time, and this guy had 5 years on me. He had, more experience, but he was really generous with his time, with his advice, as to, hey, I know you're working with that group and they're on that project. One of the things that you should look out for is this, right? And then he told me a story about, right? He didn't have to do that. So to me, that was the team player. He was a leader. And frankly, I never got past him until he left. I was always nipping at his heel, right? I was always like a couple $100,000 below him at the end of the year. I'd win a couple of months, and then, right, and he pulls something out, and it was fun. It kept it interesting. It drove our behaviors. We helped each other. It wasn't a zero-sum game, because he had a territory, I had a territory. They were clearly defined. His wins weren't going to, I wasn't going to lose because he was winning. That was the environment that we created. Our manager didn't create that. The rest of the team sucked ass, and they weren't, really part of those things. But, when you have a room of salespeople, and, and you're going to have a sales meeting, and the sales manager is, going making copies or doing something, right? And all the salespeople are in the room, and there's a lot of back and forth talking shit, right? Challenging each other, all good natured, having fun, and it's loud. That's when you got something where everybody's pulling the wagon in the same direction. There's always going to be people that lag behind, and that's fine. But if they're putting forth the effort, right, that's noticed. And I just went off on a tangent, but I think that speaks to when you have those when you have that vibe in the room, and you have that competitive juices flowing, and you realize it's not a zero sum game, and you're just trying to be the best that you can be. And we would go out for a drink and have lunch at the end of the year when he won the contest, and it was like, you made me better, was what he would say to me. And I'm like, I don't know if that's true, but I pushed you because you knew somebody was behind you. But it was fun, and the owner of the company benefited pretty well because we drove up. Two of us had 75% of the revenue, and he just liked seeing that click up. But
I bet that's fantastic. There's a certain level of camaraderie that creates too. Just being in that environment when it's friendly but competitive. It's the old adage, iron sharpens iron, and that's true. I do think that's one of the dynamics you miss out on being in more of a remote environment versus an office setting. But
no, I agree, and it's all you have is numbers, and it's hard to get that through a Zoom, right? And that's why it's important to get together on a regular basis, and go, because some of those conversations took place at the bar, right after a team dinner, and or as a sidebar, when you're just going through the day, having that mindset of wanting to get better and continuous improvement is something that we look for when I'm hiring a person, right? If they can't answer some questions that help me understand if they're continuously trying to get better with their skills and trying to get better with their behaviors, it's really not that hard to like go buy a book, to go have a conversation. That there's help out there, and it can be had at a very inexpensive way if you make that investment in yourself. So let's talk a little bit about Membrain. How long have you been with Membrain now?
Just over a year now. This is
I thought it was
1 year anniversary this month. So
awesome! Congratulations. So there's lots to talk about with Membrain, but like we're recording this before it's really been launched, but there's a module that you've experienced in being coached and managed around this module. So can you share the name if that's available? Can you share the idea behind it? And then we'll just kind of talk about the power of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as it sits right now, the name will be Membrain Elevate. And that's really just tied back to our core belief that we're helping to elevate the sales profession. And the way that we're focused on doing that is through a module that allows for a rep and their coach or their leader to really see in pretty much real time what's happening in their day to day, right? So tracking those metrics, looking at pipeline, but it goes well beyond what you might experience in like a traditional kind of one-to-one meeting, because a lot of times those lack structure. At least that's always been my experience over the years. Like sometimes, some leaders are better at it than others, but it can feel a little bit, not random, but lacking consistency, right? In terms of the way we're looking at and evaluating our progress. We can get into it a little bit more because you're very familiar with it to. Um,
But you raise a really good point, from managers and coaches, and whether that's internal in a corporate setting or, people that do what I do. If you don't have a cadence that helps the salesperson understand what's going to happen, and that isn't adhered to, it's confusing. And when there's confusion, there's lack of adoption, there's lack of energy, there's and people aren't prepared. And I have a cadence that I work with when I work with a salesperson. We do certain things based on the week of the month, beginning at the beginning of the month towards the end of the month, and they vary. When we do a pipeline review, and I open up Membrain and look at their pipeline, and I'm showing it to them, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is out of date." And I will say, because I'm very nurturing and very warm and fuzzy, is like, is this meeting a big surprise to you? Because this is supposed to be right for this meeting. If it's not right any other day of the month, it's supposed to be right, because what are we talking about today? Your pipeline, right? I mean, so it's sometimes it's harsh, because it's, if it happens on the regular. But if somebody slips up and said, "Hey, I didn't have a chance. I closed that big deal right the other day, and they reminded me they hit the numbers, but I didn't have a chance to go in and update those two deals. So let me start there, right?" And then we get into a good conversation about it. But it's when there's that apathy, and even when there's that structure to it. So the Membrain Elevate, which is way better than the other name that was in place, and I've said that to everybody that would listen to me. So I'm not saying something new, but if you're the way I understand it, what I've seen, and you correct me if I'm wrong and fill in the gaps for me, but it's a one spot that the manager and coach can go look at, as well as the contributor, as well as the individual can go look, where there's your pipeline is there, the metrics that we're measuring are there. If you're an objective management group partner, your dashboard is there to help the manager be able to see the things that remind us about the mindset challenges and skill gaps. The notes can be there, like, what did we talk about last time? What was the to-dos to make sure we're right? And we can move these things around in a way that works for the team, and it's not static. Yep. So how am I doing so far?
Yeah, I mean, we talked earlier about kind of highlighting the discomfort and embracing the discomfort. And to me, that's kind of that's what this does in a nutshell. Like it puts it so front and center. It's in your face. And maybe this sounds a little bit intense, but to me, like I open that up and I'm like, oh man, like there's something I can focus on. There's something I can improve like immediately that is going to have some level of impact on my role here, right? Whether it's progressing a deal forward, whether it's increasing my number of activities that I need to do, little things like that. But
it gives you the optics that you need to focus on that day, that week, and it's right there in front of you. Is it uncomfortable sometimes? Sure. That's okay if you take action, but you don't have to go searching around. You know exactly what you should be focusing on.
Sure.
It's a great observation.
I think that the biggest takeaway for me is, in a lot of organizations, those things don't happen until a sales rep is on a PIP, right? A performance improvement plan. And to me, if you have a system like this in place where you can see those things over time, make those micro or macro adjustments to what's happening, you can avoid those stressful conversations altogether because you're ahead of it. It's there. It's on the table. Your coach knows what's going on. Your sales leader knows what's going on. The rep is aware of it. And it just doesn't allow room for things to be a shock to the rep at the end of the day. And if you're talking about creating forecasts that are accurate and creating a culture of wanting to get better and improve, that's a great place to start, because it gives you all the tools that you need, to build that foundation, and then, begin really elevating your abilities as a coach, as a leader, as a rep. And I haven't seen anything else like that out there that does it to that level.
I haven't either. And Membrain and Paul's been really, really active with partners to get feedback. I think we're all excited about this opportunity. I learned something the other day that even if they're not a Membrain user at the moment, that this will still work as a standalone tool. And that's really powerful, right? For a variety of reasons, but it brings this coaching idea and this having everything right in front of you, so that there's no it's so there's no surprises, like you said. And what I've seen is you talk to somebody, you don't put somebody on a PIP without talking about it, right? So there's like 60 days, at least in my mind, is I'm going to spend 60 to 90 days saying, all right, what we're trying to do is get your performance levels up. And these are the 3 areas we're going to focus on. And if we don't get there, here's what's going to happen. But I don't think we're going to get there if you put in this effort, right? And I will, I'll say to them, if you're willing to do the work, I'm willing to do whatever I need to do to help you, but I can't want it more than you. So using Membrain Elevate, there's absolutely no surprise you're on a PIP, right? No. Because it's there. Even if the manager doesn't have that program to talk about things in advance, it's no different than when somebody gets terminated. Like, they're surprised. Like, really? You haven't hit a number in 6 months. Your activity levels are way down. We've talked about it once a week for the last 120 weeks, or last 3 months. How are you surprised? So that's a really good point. Plus, the tools there are giving you where you need to focus. It's giving you access to the notes that you need, and you don't have to go looking around for a piece of paper that you wrote something down on, or a journal that you have. And I've got 3 journals sitting over here that I separate. Like, this is one topic, this is the other topic, but it's still a pain in the ass. Sure. So, but I like to write, and that helps me think about what I'm doing. But this is like one little container where you have all the info. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited that this is going to be available. And we're recording towards the end of February. I think this is going to be launched in March of 24. Yeah. And my off base will probably drop this. I might be able to move some things around to drop this towards the end of March, but early April, we'll get this out there. So if somebody can call me if they're interested in this, and I can help that, and then Zack and I will work with you to get you the understanding if it's a good fit for your needs. Mm-hmm. But if you call Zack and say, "Hey, I heard you on the podcast say this," that's important, right? Because we're just trying to get the word out. Yeah. So what's the best way to get a hold of Zack?
Probably the easiest way is either through LinkedIn or email at Membrain. Zack.
Which is just your just Zack.Bower@membrain.com, which we'll have all that in the show notes for people. You don't have to stop your car and write that down. So I think we covered some stuff that I don't normally cover in the podcast, really, to help salespeople think a little different about their role, and that there's plenty of help out there. Mm-hmm. Membrain's a great tool. It helps leaders. It helps get a forecast right. It helps business owners. It helps sales managers, sales leaders. and it really helps. One of the things Membrain does is help salespeople. If they record something once and they put it in the right spot, they never have to write a freaking report, right? It's all there, and somebody can go access this. It shows up in so many different ways to gather information. Is there some piece of Membrain that you experienced over the last year that you really like? This is something that's going to help a salesperson.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things that we help with is through the win-loss dashboards that are built in, and that's really kind of taking elements of those notes, and aspects of a deal, and putting them in a way, or showing them in a way that helps you, one, narrow down your ICP, right, your ideal client profile, and then figure out early on how you can qualify or disqualify that deal based on factors that are going to either create massive success on the backside of that, or really just be a roadblock and make things more difficult. And I think it's worth noting and giving credit where it's due is to Nate Tudis, who really showed me and highlighted how that can be super impactful in those conversations. But I would say that's one of the biggest ones for me.
Yeah, you're talking about the win-loss analytics that you can dive. You can dive so many different ways, so deep into that, but it will have a huge impact on a salesperson's effectiveness and a company's ability to grow revenue, because we stop wasting time.
Yeah,
which is really what effectiveness is about. So great point. Shout out to Nate. He's a friend. He's a trusted advisor of me and Helix, and I know he works with you. And he never falls short of trying to add value. That's for sure.
That's absolutely
so
right.
We're just making Nate's little head bigger as we go here. So last question, Zach. Past or present relationship with cigars?
Yeah. It's not something I talk about or lead with a lot, I guess. Like, I don't know, I'm close with people, but cigars have always been there kind of in the background. Like growing up, one of my uncles, when he would come up to visit, that was always a thing like he would do with, other family members. They'd go out on the back deck, have a stogie and enjoy it. And to me, like, cigars have always been, I don't know if it's just like a nostalgia thing, right? Or longing for, some unattainable ideal. I don't know. They've always had like a cool factor to me, right? So my first experience with that was really the gas station variety of cigars. And I don't mean like the bottom of the barrel stuff, but really he would always bring grenadiers, right? Or grenadiers, depending on how you
Grenadiers,
like to
depending
pronounce,
upon where you live. Yeah.
But it's so funny because you get a 5 or 6 pack of those things. They're probably under $10. I don't know what they are nowadays, but
they used to be under $2, but
yeah. But you get them, they'd be in cellophane, but they're not like properly humidified, right? And they're like half.
Oh, they're sitting with the cigarettes in the back of the gas station. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my first experience, right? Just like that really dry, awful, like terrible
short filler.
Yeah. I mean, it good in a pinch, I guess, like if you're on the golf course or whatever and you don't really care too much. But I never forget that kind of first experience. And then later on that transitioned into like that Cuba, I think was my very first like real cigar, which to a lot of purists would be, a mortal sin, starting with something that's
I wasn't going to say anything,
infused.
But go ahead.
But
you got to start someplace.
Yeah, absolutely. But that really kind of opened the door to, learning more about them, and not something I do frequently, but I do enjoy them from time to time.
It's a good story. I ask that question pretty much every episode, and what for guys, it has to do. There's always some element of nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
There's always some element of the uncle, the dad, the grandfather that they admired.
Mm-hmm.
They just liked the time being around all of those folks, and those there are conversations involved, there were lessons learned, there were jokes, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And to me, that's one of the things that kind of it's a reason to get together. It brings people together, and I've said this 100 times, that you could be sitting anywhere in the country, anywhere on the planet, really,
Mm-hmm.
and you can look at the guy next to you and say, what are you smoking?
Yeah.
And then you're in a conversation, and it can go wherever it goes, but you have an immediate connection of the brother or sister of the leaf is what I refer to it as.
Absolutely. So, it's a great equalizer, very similar to, a cup of coffee, right? And those two things go really well together, but
absolutely. Along with bourbon and rum and tequila, and there's a variety of other things. Port, Grand Marnier. So, all right, man, that was a good story. I really appreciate you dropped some real good insights. I'm glad we're able to get this Membrain Elevate, to get that name changed from what it was. I'm not going to say it out loud, but I'm really excited about this product, and you and I will be working through that to bring that out to the community. So, man, thank you, and have a great rest of the week.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks again for having me.
Hey, thanks for being part of the Sales and Cigar community. I wanted to share that I wrote a book, The 7 Critical Mistakes CEOs Make with Their Sales Organization. The CEOs who've read it tell me I cut to the chase quickly, get to the point, explain exactly what they're experiencing, why they're experiencing it, and how to fix it. So if you want a free copy, go check out the link in the show notes.